You know, it's an unrealistic fantasy to expect typewriters to work flawlessly like newly made gadgets. Like you go down to your favorite electronics store and you buy a new phone or whatever and you expect everything to work perfectly. It's unrealistic to expect typewriters, especially manual typewriters, to work perfectly when you buy them used, of course, from somebody either locally or online. In this post-typewriter world that we live in, we do live in a post-typewriter era. Having issues with your typewriter is the norm, not the exception. This is not the era where there were a dozen typewriter repair shops on one street in your town, and secretaries and office people were constantly using typewriters and constantly getting them fixed, and it was expected that they would work good. Have you ever thought why there were so many typewriter repair shops back in the day? That's because they broke a lot. They broke easily when used heavily. Even the best ones need service. But in this post-typewriter world we live in, as collectors and users of typewriters, our expectations should be different. And our challenge, the challenge of the typewriter collector and aficionado, is learning to live with less than perfect. We have to learn to recalibrate our expectations. You know, the fact that we can use our fingers to mechanically imprint text onto paper in this day and age, that is a minor miracle in itself. The fact that these wonderfully archaic devices can still work as well as they do. Let me show you an example with this typewriter here. This is a Sears Forecast 12, which is essentially a Smith Corona Galaxy 12 kind of machine, and it wasn't working at all. You could type letters and the carriage would move 2 or 3 spaces and then it would stop and nothing would work, and I had to unjam some parts in the escapement. There was one little piece that was bent that was related to the half space feature that was really the root cause. But it's working okay right now, except for the fact that it tends to skip after you type one of the letters on the left side of the keyboard, like E's and F's and C's and A's and S's. So one of these letters, when you type it, it will intermittently skip, and it skips more often when you're in the low touch setting. Medium and high, not so much or hardly at all. And the other problem it has is when you're in the low touch setting, when you want to go to move the ribbon color selector, it's really hard to move. But if you put it up to the high touch setting, then it's easy to move. So this typewriter belongs to a friend of mine, and I'm attempting to service it for him. He's going to give it away. So the question is, how far do you go? How much time do you spend in trying to service these last few remaining problems? The skipping issue, and then the problem with the ribbon color selector knob. And this is one of these classic questions that in 2018 typewriter aficionados really have to deal with, because no typewriter is perfect. These are old machines. The parts aren't available anymore. They were designed for a limited lifetime, even the best designed ones. Now we have a limited supply of typewriters in the world, and when you come across a problem like this where the machine fundamentally works fine, essentially for writing purposes it works okay, it just has these few foibles. If you put the touch selector on medium, you probably won't have any skips at all. So I'm at the point where I'm really not going to fix this problem. It's just a problem that they're going to have to live with, and I will simply give them the instructions that in this particular machine, when you want to change the color from black to red, from the top to the bottom of the ribbon, slightly press one of the keys or put the touch selector on the heavy setting. Now that's not the way the machine was designed to work, but it's kind of like that's the way this machine works now. Think of it as an old Model T Ford. It's a little cantankerous. It doesn't work quite like it did when it was designed. You have to pull the choke a little bit differently. You have to pump the gas a few times. The other neighbor's antique Model T may work differently. Maybe you don't want to pump the gas because his carburetor is a little different or something. So that's the way these machines are. Each one has their own personality based on their wear and how things are starting to fail. And that's the real question, is how do you live with typewriters in 2018? Now consider the professional repair shop. Consider their dilemma. There's not too many professional typewriter repair shops left in the United States, certainly. But the ones that are left, it's a tough job because the expectation of the new typewriter owner is they expect an old typewriter to work just like as if you went down to Best Buy and bought a new electronic device. They expect it all to be working perfectly, and they expect it to be serviced under some kind of warranty if it doesn't. The reality is you're buying an old mechanical device that is worn to some degree. And it would be tough, I could see, being a typewriter repairman, unless you were really, really skilled. And certainly I am not skilled like a true typewriter professional. Is it unrealistic to keep working at these typewriter problems in our collection as just amateurs who collect typewriters? Is it unrealistic to keep working at them until they're perfect, or to consider the individual typewriter like this one to be not as good as another typewriter in your collection because it has only like one or two little remaining problems, and we're going to relinquish this to the B grade in our collection because it has a couple problems? That's a good question, and I think we need to reassess our expectations with typewriters. Here's another example. This is my Smith Corona Skywriter. These are wonderful machines, highly touted as some of the best ultra portables ever made. But this particular machine has an intermittent problem with, yes, you guessed it, skipping. It's an intermittent problem in the escapement. Now these machines are pretty easy to take apart to get down into the escapement. You can take the entire chassis out of the body and get right to it, and I've done that several times. It's very easy to access. Yet, in spite of the ease of access of the Skywriter to its mechanism, the ease of servicing, it still has an intermittent skipping problem. Now, does that mean that I'm going to relinquish the Skywriter to the B grade or C grade of my collection and consider it junk? Absolutely not. The Skywriter has wonderful qualities as an ultra portable writing device. It's very lightweight, very portable, has a wonderful touch to it. It is one of the best ultra portables ever made. It has this one problem: it skips intermittently, and probably based on partly on how I use it, my touch, the action of my typing style has a lot to do with how much skipping it happens. So what my responsibility is as a typewriter user and owner in 2018 is I have to change my expectations. It's a wonderful machine, the Skywriter or this Forecast 12 Sears. Wonderful machine, a lot of great qualities, but they're old. They're built in the 1960s in this case. And that was a long time ago. That was half a century ago. And my expectations have to change along with their age. Is the Skywriter less useful as a writing machine to me because it has this one mechanical problem? Do I now want to stick it in the closet, not use it, and go find another ultra-portable machine that maybe doesn't have any mechanical problems? I think it's still useful. I think it is a useful writing tool, and it's my responsibility as an owner and user of it to figure out how best to put it to use in its remaining years of life, living within the reality of its mechanical foibles. There's only so many typewriters left in the world. They're not being made anymore. There's no aftermarket industry that's remanufacturing all the parts of typewriters like there is with the antique or classic car industry. You can buy all the parts needed to make your own Model T Ford from scratch, from catalogs. It might cost you $100,000, but you can make a new old car, including the chassis, the engine, the suspension. All those parts are being sold as aftermarket replacements. But the same thing is not happening with typewriters. So there's only a finite number of typewriters in the world. And as they become more popular in this typewriter revival, there's going to be less and less quality machines out there for us to buy, for us to acquire. And so our responsibility is to those remaining machines. Do we discard them because they have one or two little minor problems, or do we consider them still useful writing machines? I think that's a really powerful question. And is our desire to have perfect mechanical typewriters, is it prematurely dwindling the supply of typewriters? As there's more and more people buying typewriters online and having them shipped, and having those typewriters destroyed in shipping because of improper packaging, perhaps, is it better for the life of the remaining typewriters that they not get purchased? Maybe they just go from Aunt Mabel's attic to the local thrift store and never get shipped and packaged, maybe purchased locally. What I'm suggesting is we have a responsibility to the remaining typewriters in the world that are still working. We have a responsibility to try to fix the problems that might be present in them, but to live with the problems that we have to otherwise live with and not fix. I know that as an amateur repairman of typewriters who is still in a learning curve, I've probably done damage to some of my machines trying to fix them, more damage than was probably present originally because of my overzealousness in trying to get a typewriter to have all the problems fixed and have it perfect, instead of just being accepting the idea of having to live with the few problems it has. Live with a skipping problem. Learn to modulate your typing style if that's what it takes. This is a half-space machine, and one of the things I find handy is to do a single line carriage return and then click the carriage back up one click, and you can do all this test typing with a lot more density of letters on the page just to save paper. But it also enables you to easily tell when you have a skip, because it shows up as a empty white space in this otherwise solid field of inky characters. And that's a good way to figure out after which characters the skipping is happening. The problem with this machine with the skipping, if you see this little arm here sticking out of the escapement and it trips like that every time you type a letter, occasionally it'll hang up. Right there, it made a little hang. Didn't reset all the way. There it goes. See, a couple times it did it right there. Right there. So something right in the heart of the escapement itself, it's not resetting. So one other thing I've noticed about this machine is it looks like the bottom of almost all the letters is slightly shaded faint. If you look at like this line, all the bottom letters of the letters look faded. And so I'm suspecting that one of the things I need to do is adjust the motion of the shifting upper and lower case. And that is set with these two set screws. So this one sets the lowercase and this one sets the uppercase position. Okay, so after adjusting the motion, upper and lowercase, I have good alignment and I don't have the shading anymore. Looks better, but I still have this skipping going on, and it seems to be mostly when I type, hit the keys really hard, and it only skips after a letter on the left side of the keyboard, the E and the A and the D and the S, for instance, and really only when it's the touch selector is on the lower setting, it does it more often than the others. So, but I haven't quite figured out what's causing it exactly. Now, it's possible, though, that there could be a tool that might help us fix these difficult problems. And especially with Smith Coronas like this Sears Forecast 12, one of the great tools that we have available is the Typewriter Repair Bible. And this one is for the Smith Corona floating shift models. Technically, this one I have is for the 5 series, but the escapement part of it is similar enough to the 6 series. And if you're not familiar with these, they have wonderful illustrations. They underline all the key parts and show you arrows pointing right to where the parts are located. And specifically, I went through some of the major escapement related adjustments on this Sears Forecast 12, and I got it to the point now. Well, let me show you here. This is rapid typing with the touch selector to the lightest position, which is the problem it was having. And now I have essentially no skipping. And I'm pretty thrilled about that. I think this machine is going to be usable. And so not every machine out there has a service manual as thorough as Ted Monk's reprints of the Smith Corona manuals and some of the other manuals. There are some brands out there that just didn't have thorough service literature published, or if they did, it's not real commonly available. So at least with this Smith Corona Galaxy 12 chassis, the 6 series from the 1960s, I think I'm at the point now where I can call this machine working pretty good. The only problem remaining is this stubborn ribbon color selector that you have to either put the touch selector on high or you have to press a key slightly to get it to easily move. And I think that's a problem that I can live with. So again, it's not perfect, but as I was saying earlier, perfect is the enemy of good enough. I'm Joe Van Cleve, and I'm a typewriter lover, a typewriter user, but I have to respect the machines for what they are. I can't have too unrealistic of expectations of them working perfectly. And my responsibility is to those machines to keep them as useful as possible without doing further damage to them and accepting them for what they are. You guys have yourselves a great day.